So let me just introduce Brad Hinze for the benefit of our recording here, that Brad is a longtime CLC member and also an expert on synodality, having done much research on synods in general, as well as synods of bishops and parish councils. So welcome to Brad.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Let me take this opportunity to say to all of you, while I can see your faces here, before I try to put up my PowerPoint presentation, what a joy it is to be here with you. I've prayed with many of you here, although I imagined that we would be in the gym, and we would all have coffee in our hand and a pastry in our hand before the event began, but we will have to wait for the next time. It's particularly joyful for me to be with a group that I consider the Council of the Wise. You people know from a long time of experience about what it means to discern, what it means to search for decisions together in communities. And so anything I say to you is really a reflection of all the things I've learned from you through your practices. I also want to say a special word of thanks to Mary Ann Cassidy and Anne-Marie Brennan for their help and guidance in preparation for this event, for making this possible, for the prayers and all that. It's really quite incredible. The difficult situation of COVID has made it very challenging for all of us in the classroom and in these contexts. But all the care that you've done to make prayer possible and reflection possible here is greatly appreciated. So let me see if I can get my PowerPoint presentation up here, and I'll begin. So I'm going to offer a brief presentation, 20 minutes or so, and we'll have a chance to pray about that. And then we'll have a chance for you to share some things in your small group, okay? Oh, before I turn over though, one of the things that struck me during our prayer this morning is this, and that is, what's going on right now in the church is as important as Vatican II, it seems to me. The people that I read and I talk to in various places around the United States and around the world are saying, we have the possibility of something here like the Second Vatican Council. But instead of it taking place in Rome, where all the bishops gather and talk with each other and with their theologians, what we have is spread out all over the world with local synods of bishops and Episcopal conferences. And it's really incredibly dramatic. How will it work out? None of us knows. There are a lot of risks involved. But we see places around the world, in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, in Native communities in so many different places that are taking great hope in this. They're finding this so inspirational for their local churches. And I think that's really at the heart of what Francis is trying to accomplish here. Okay, now the hard part. Oh, I think this might be it. No, that's you. Let's see here. Oh, this looks something like it. Okay, so you'll see my face over on the side here. Can you all hear me, I hope? So basically, the assignment was to talk about synodality in action. And the more I look at this, I think of Ignatius quite a bit and all the things that we've learned together. And so I thought it would be helpful for us to think about synodality in action in relation to Ignatian discernment, and then have a chance to do some work on our own discernment process of what's going on in the church right now. So I'll set the stage for that, but you're going to be doing all the hard work. And so we begin. Uh-oh, I'm going to put my face over here on the side. So Advent is a time to renew our hope in Jesus, the Word made flesh. But this Advent, we also pray that the Spirit empowers the church as it engages in synodality in action. What is synodality? Oh, that's the big question. And where does this idea come from? Austin Ivory taught us at the last time we met about how Pope Francis's vision of synodality is inspired by the Latin American church. And this is definitely true, no doubt about it. And Austin Ivory is the most important, one of the most important persons to articulate that in the US and globally, really. But influenced by our Ignatian spirituality, let us consider how Francis's view of synodality is shaped by Ignatian discernment in common. Today, we start to put this into action as we ask, what is the Spirit saying to the church among us and through us? So the big question to start out with is, what is synodality? Now, you've probably been hearing so many different ways of talking about this. I always like to go back, though, to the way the word emerges in the New Testament. The term hodos, at the heart of synodos, comes from the Acts of the Apostles. It's the term that means the way of the Lord. And it's used, I numbered them all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 times in Acts of the Apostles. People at a certain point, people started to say, are you following the way? And that's how Christians were associated at the beginning. And it echoes the Isaiah passage. A voice cries out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Synhodos is the prefix syn, with. So we're talking about being on the way with others, together with others. And this is the idea that's at the heart of what Francis focuses on. He loves to think about the church as the pilgrim people of God acting in a synodal way, with synodality. And so he speaks about advancing our journey together by means of synodality. In fact, you know, they've written about this in official documents, and they're saying, Francis is the first one to really use this term synodality. And synod was a term, synod and council is a term that's used in classical literature, going back to the earliest Christianity, first, second, third generations, these terms come up, synodos and concilium. During this period of time, at the Second Vatican Council in particular, synods and councils were usually associated with the role of bishops and theologians, but the Second Vatican Council talked a lot about the people of God, all the people of God, and their sense of faith, the sense of the faithful. And so Francis says, yeah, let's talk about synods. But let's make sure we're talking about synodality in terms of all the faithful. And so to create a context where we can listen to all the faithful at all the levels of the church. This is really his big contribution. It was in the council documents, but it really hasn't had its day of being realized fully in the church. That's what we're witnessing in our lifetime. And it's very dramatic. So that Francis is saying, he's quite diligent in this, saying we need for the Pope to be in synodal conversation and relationships with bishops, theologians, and the laity. And of course, women religious are included in the last, but so synodality thus requires listening to and learning from the Spirit amidst all the people of God. So we've been reading this preparatory document, or I sent it out. It's the shortest version of this document that we have that the Roman office on the Synod of Bishops prepared. And so it seems digestible. The other ones are longer, 17 pages, 40 pages. That's a long read. This one I want to focus on just a little couple thoughts here from that document. Basically, the document is talking about the need to look at the scriptures. That's always the way to start. Let's talk about the scriptures, and we'll spend 2 little slides here talking about that. And then we're going to talk about Ignatius for the Ignatius and the Society of Jesus after that. So that's basically what I want to look at. So basically, Austin Ivory was talking about the synods in terms of Latin American Bishops Conference. That was the big inspiration for Francis in his career in Latin America, but also the base community, the vital, the living people of God in Argentina. So anyway, we start with this. I think the 2 slides I'm going to show, I think, are very wise and clever and important for us. And they're kind of, this first one is talking about the Gospels, and it's saying, so basically there are dynamics at work in the synod, in a synodality, and we find them in the Gospels. And in a sense, I view this as being quite similar to what Ignatius says when he says composition of place. When you're meditating on a scripture passage, you have to imagine yourself in the world of the text. And when you're in the world of the text of the Bible, usually you see Jesus, 1, you see a crowd of people, 2, you see an apostle or the apostles, 3, and then you see dark forces, destructive powers, 4. And so they said, that was their first thing. They said, make sure you have the composition of place right. Make sure you are looking for Jesus. And how is Jesus acting in the Gospels? He's the protagonist who announces God's reign, the power of God's reign to all people without partiality, and especially looking for those who feel separated and abandoned. That's the message we've heard from Francis again and again and again. But building on what he finds in the scriptures, the crowd. So this text wisely focuses on who is in the crowd. Well, everybody's in the crowd. Jews and Greeks, Samaritans, Syrophoenicians, women and men, the poor and the rich, the marginalized, the sick and the lame. It's inclusive. This is you. And so if you get in the scene and meditating on the scene and you're not aware of everyone in the room, then you're not really getting into the deepest dynamics of synodality in the scripture passage. Third, of course, it's the apostles, the prototypical figures that we think of in terms of episcopoi. The overseers is the term, overseers, episcopoi, episcopal, bishops. The apostles are identified as those called and sent. That's what an apostle is. An apostle is someone sent to carry on the message and the mission of Jesus Christ. And so the apostle is the prototype of the bishop, of the overseer. Third, the destructive powers. I think they call it the demonic powers here, which is consistent with Francis's, it's consistent with the Gospels, but it's what we need to recognize is that there are antagonistic forces at work here. And the gospel passage we always have to have a peripheral vision when we're looking at the scriptures and are saying, are there destructive powers at work here that are pulling us down, that are not opening us up to be inclusive, to let the power of God's reign take place here in this community? And so the bishops, the office of the Synod of Bishops is basically saying, don't tell the story unless you're attuned to that as well. And these can emerge in synodal processes as sources of distraction and destruction. Okay, so that's the background. That's sort of like the notes for the drama that you would find in any passage. Then the example they give one example, I think this is the only major example, is the example of two conversions intertwined, Peter and Cornelius. I think this is brilliant. I think this is very clever. I wasn't so aware of this, but the more I think about it, so what they have identified here is the prototype of the Pope, right? Peter is the prototype of the Pope, or Peter is the prototype of every bishop. So, and they're basically saying there's two conversions, the prototype, the bishop's conversion, and someone else, someone who literally is an outsider. It's a non-Jew. So the original core group of Christians were Jews, the followers of Jesus, Jews, Jesus, Jew, mother, Jewish. I mean, that was the core group. However, Jesus opened up to these marginal figures who were righteous people. And Cornelius gives us an example of that. Here he is, a Roman centurion, a leader in the Roman military forces who converts. He converts and he prays to God. He has an affective conversion to God, and he offers almsgiving to the poor. It's a conversion of the heart. But he's not Jewish, and he's not circumcised. And so he represents then an outsider who is invited in. Peter, on the other hand, is Jewish. His task, remember Peter and Paul, Peter's task is to appeal to the Jewish members of the community. Of course, to marginalize people, but his roots, his background is in the Jewish community. Paul, on the other hand, Paul is a very faithful Jew. However, he's overwhelmed by this, and he sees, I've got to appeal to the Gentiles. I've got to make my mission is to appeal to the Gentiles. So here's Peter. Peter's in the Acts of the Apostles has this scene where he has a vision, and the vision, he has a vision and he hears the voice, and in it, he is told to kill and eat the animals not eaten by Jews, not considered clean. And the voice he hears says, what God has made clean, you must not call profane. This is the revelation that he receives. And it's like a ton of bricks on him, because it goes to the heart of who his identity as a Jewish follower of Jesus, and how he's comported himself in that community. And Peter is converted through this. How long it took, I don't know. It may have been a long process, but he came to the realization that we must be open to those that we consider outside our group, for whatever, even outside our practices. That's what's really interesting about this. So Cornelius he's a devoted man. He has a conversion of the heart about God and about caring for the poor, but he's not going to change in certain ways. And so Peter comes to the realization that he has to be open to this. And this is a part of the gospel as well. A brilliant example. That's what the church is trying to do right now. We're trying to say, how can we be open to people that we might not have been open to? How can we recognize that there are some actions that we might not consider acceptable by our standards, but we have to recognize that they're acceptable? This is a pretty clever and wise example to use in this document about synodality in the global church. Now, fast forward in Acts of the Apostles, this is the official place. Acts of the Apostles, chapter 15, verse 1 through 29 is the place where we have the Synod of Jerusalem. This is the first Synod of Jerusalem. And in it, a consensus was reached. Gentiles can be baptized. We're gonna open this up and saying, yes, it's not just for Jews. We're opening up to this broader. Wow, what a beautiful way of starting this preparatory document. We're an inclusive church. This is what the power of God's reign is all about. But we must be mindful of the fact that the story isn't over at Acts of the Apostles. Once the synod takes place, it's not like it's all over. It's not like the tension is all over. The tension goes on. And in Galatians chapter 2, 1 through 10, this passage was probably written before the Synod of Jerusalem took place. I would say it's probably written in the 50s, and Acts of the Apostles was written in 80s. In any event, what we have here is an example of the standard conflict between Jews and Gentiles about eating rituals. So basically, though, it's a reminder for us that the tension does not simply go away by the fact that you've had a synod. We know this. We know this in our life. We know diocesan synods know this. The Synod of Bishops knows this as well. So now I want to flip gears. So basically, Ivory said, look to the Latin American Bishops Conference. Francis has learned a ton from them, and he has. There's no doubt about it. But also, before he got involved, before he was named a bishop, before he became auxiliary bishop, in Argentina, and then becoming cardinal, he was a Jesuit, and he was in the seminary system as well, taught in the seminary. So I want us to think about this. I want us to think about, at the heart of synodality is an Ignatian impulse. And you people are the experts on this, right? And so let's just review what you all know better than I know. I want to tell you what you know. So synods and synodality are not only learned from biblical stories, but also the stories of saints like Ignatius of Loyola. Through his experiences of conversion, and initially through his way of personal discernment. This is something he discovered in his earliest phase, right? So we have personal discernment. This is step one. From June 1521 to February 1522 at Loyola, while he's convalescing, he discovers personal discernment. He discovers consolation and desolation. He discovers the power of meditating and contemplating on Jesus' life in the Gospels. This has a profound impact on him in terms of his own sense of calling, his own sense of election. What am I supposed to do with my life? His own desires, his own aspirations. And And then for 11 months at Manresa in 1523, he develops the spiritual exercises and writes. So here he's crafting, he's trying to write down all the things that he's experiencing and piece it all together. And in the midst of this, then he also sets out two sets of rules for the personal discernment of spirits. So I want you to be mindful of this. In the earliest phase of Ignatius, we have him developing his own experience of personal discernment, consolation, desolation, meditation on the scriptures, and even this set of rules of personal discernment where it gets a little complex, or there are difficulties involved in discerning what's going on in one's life. But then I want to fast forward to the next phase. So if I can move my face, I can see my title. Developing Discernment in Common. 1539 is the date I'm going to use, and I'll tell you why. Ignatius deliberates with his companions. So Father Dan knows this, but I don't know this. So I was just fishing around on Google to know who. I want to know who's in the first group of friends, who's in the first group of companions. This is the best list I could get online. And I know it's not, I don't think it's complete, but in any event, I put it up there. These are names that we are familiar with. Peter Faber, I should have put him first. Francis Xavier, Alfonso Salmeron, Diego Lainez, Nicholas Babadia, and then Simoa Rodriguez. I'm sure there are others. You don't have to correct me now, Dan. And then, so I'm getting you to think about 1539, but what we have to realize is that before 1539, there are years before where the companions of Ignatius are with him, and they're talking about what it is that their mission is. What are they called to do together? So it's not just about their own personal call and election, about what they're called and elected to do together. And so they're talking about that with each other and experimenting with ideas and struggling with it, basically. And so in Montmartre in Paris in 1534, they're talking about this and struggling with this. What could it be? It's conversation with each other about this. In Venice in 1537, again, they're talking about it and struggling. Well, what should we be doing this? It's a spiritual conversation about what they're called to do collectively. Vincenza in 1537 as well. But roughly 15 years after his initial conversion and his cultivation of practices of personal discernment, Ignatius developed with his friends practices of discernment in common, which we find delineated in the 1539, it's called the Deliberations on the Charter of the Society of Jesus. You can easily pull that up online. You get the whole document there. Okay. So what I want you to realize is this. That's basically it in a nutshell: personal discernment and communal discernment in common. Those are the two pathways that Ignatius opened up, and that for many of us, and for me, for most of my life, Chris and I experienced was personal discernment. We struggled when we were in Detroit and we were in Milwaukee, and then we came to New York here. In Detroit and in Milwaukee, especially in Milwaukee, we struggled mightily to figure out what discernment in common might be for our common mission. Oh, that was very difficult. We had a version of that in New York as well. But what is so important is that in 1965, the decree on the renewal of religious life, Perfecta Caritatis, came out at the Second Vatican Council. They said in number 2 of that document, they said, you have to go, all religious communities, all religious orders have to go back to their founding figures and find out about their original charism, find out about the identity of their community. So the Jesuits, like the Dominicans and the Franciscans and the Sisters of Mercy, et cetera, IHM and all that, they all did this during this period of time in the 60s, 70s, 80s. The Jesuits have continued this since then. For over 50 years, they've been doing this. And in 65, they have the General Congregation number 31, 65 to 66, and they start a process of going back to the 1539 document and saying, and earlier beyond that. So they start to do archival work on that material, but then they also start to say, well, what really happened there in that discernment in common? So for 50 years, and up until when Arturo Sosa was elected Father General, each general congregation took up discussion of discernment in common. That's not all their time, but every time they do it. And every Father General, Arupe, Kovenbach, Nicolas, and Sosa have all written documents about what discernment in common means. What is it? How are we doing it? They ask provincials, please report to me about how it's going. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? Where do we need to grow? For 50 years, I don't feel so old now. For 50 years, they've been trying to figure this out. So I want to suggest that we find a wonderful instance of this, a breakthrough moment for the Jesuits. It begins in 2003 from an invitation in 1995. In 1995, at the General Congregation, the body assembled said, we need to really think about a list of priorities. When they gathered together, when the General Congregation met, they talked about everything. You know, they talked about what's going on in the hinterlands and in the community. And they had various topics that they felt were important to talk about. Governance and specific issues that were, and they came up with the point after, so this is 95 after going through this since 1965, but throughout their whole history, they said, we need for there to be a list of priorities here. We need for the Father General to give us a list of priorities because there's so much on the list. And it's reasonable. Let me just add I'm seeing a message from Anne Marie. Is that because I'm going too long? I need to wrap up. Okay. So what we have here is wrap up, Brad. What we have here is 2003 list of priorities. Then in 2019 with Sosa, he talks about it in terms of apostolic preferences. And so, just the last line of this, and that is, apostolic preferences are the fruit of a process of discernment in common lasting almost 2 years. All Jesuits were invited to take part, and with our mission partners, lay mission partners or women religious mission partners. And that was confirmed by, we know these four, yeah, so we know these four, but anyway, it's worth dwelling upon because I think what we can say is that the process of synodality we're involved in now is an attempt to surface what are the issues of priority. So these are the Pope's key strategies. We need to learn to listen. We need to practice parrhesia, which is a Greek word, which means speak out, be courageous, be honest, be bold, and be humble. We need to dream, to exercise our communal, critical, productive, and strategic imagination, and develop a social dream, a cultural dream, an ecological dream, and an ecclesial dream. We need to stand up and act up. I just listed here. Can I get 2 more minutes, Anne-Marie? Can I have 2 more minutes?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so basically, yeah, how could she disagree with me? I have the microphone. So I want to just say, we've all lived through this period of time that we've been living through here, not just COVID, but this whole period. And we need to pay attention to the conflicts that we've experienced. Where do we hear the spirit in the cries of the poor, the wounded, the marginalized, the damaged earth? And I want us to say, we need to see these voices and say, what is this saying about the synodal path for us? Victims of clergy abuse, clericalism, abuse of hierarchical authority, the assault on women's dignity and leadership in the church, all the discussions that's been going on about violence against races, religions, and cultures, the disrespect for LGBTQ people, and then going back to the discussion of the divorced and remarried and who are not able to receive communion, wounded earth, or air and water pollution, loss of biodiversity. 1 second here, and then I think I'm close. Yes, this is my last slide, and then I can hand it over. So I want to use this as a case study to end my remarks, and that is, so synodality is about, looking for these moments of conflict and saying, how can we speak up in synodal context about issues that are controversial and difficult? In 1995, at the General Congregation of the Society of Jesus, they came out with a statement, Decree number 14, and that's talked about supporting women, women's role in society and in the church, but also in the Society of Jesus. 1995, 2005, 2015. So for quite a while, this has been a struggle, and it's been awkward. It's been difficult. And a lot of women feel like it's not really received the attention it deserves. And so Father General Sosa, just this last March, said, we need to talk about this more. And there are women that are, when he said that, some women cringed because they have such painful memories of the last time it came up, and they felt like nothing happened from it. But here Sosa is saying, we've got to dig back down into this. And so they have 3 years. They have 10 members, 6 women, 3 Jesuits, 1 layman. And he says, what role do women really play in the processes of discernment and decision-making for our life mission? What place do they have among the challenges of a world that marginalizes women and of a church that is reluctant to recognize the co-responsibility in the leadership of the community of the disciples of the Lord Jesus? So I leave you with that, because what we have here is Sosa, like Pope Francis, saying women, like LGBTQ people, like issues of race, all these difficult issues, we can't run away from them. And synodality has to give us a chance to speak out about them. Okay, Anne-Marie, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Brad. That's really a wealth of information. And yeah, I mean, I think it emphasizes like how significant this moment in time is for us. So Yeah, so what we'd like now is to move to personal prayer. So people have some time to pray on this. And what we'd like you to think about is, let me see, Brad, would you mind unsharing your screen, and I'll put the this other slide
Yeah,
up.
sorry. Oh, I guess I'm way off my time.
That's okay. Yeah, we can make an adjustment. That's no problem. Yeah, so here's the for personal prayer. We'll allocate about 15 minutes. So we'll come back at 10:20. So that way there's enough time. It's not a whole lot of time, but at least it'll give that time. What are two insights that struck you as Brad was talking? And what do you consider to be one of the most challenging difficulties in the church that needs to be addressed today to foster the healing, vitality, and mission of the church? And what invitation do I feel from the Holy Spirit on this for me personally, my CLC group, my parish, and/or the broader church? So I'm going to change this now, return to 10:20. So keep your computers on. Don't leave the Zoom meeting, but you can mute and turn off your videos, which some of you had. So we'll return here again at 10:20, and then hopefully everybody will be here, and then we can break up into small groups. So thank you again, Brad. This was wonderful. Good, and I'll stop the recording.
Anne-Marie, can you just